Hey guys, in this month's Historical Fiction 101, I'm going to be sharing with you some upcoming releases in the historical fiction genre from July to December of 2023. So let's get going with this video. I have 20 books here that I'm going to be sharing with you guys, and as always, the historical fiction genre is massive every time I do these videos, and yeah, there's literally hundreds of books that I'm not able to put on this list, or else this video would be freakishly long. They're already kind of long enough as it is with me doing 20 books to recommend. But yeah, that being said, these 20 books are ones that I kind of personally found interesting that I will be kind of more apt to purchase myself. But yeah, you guys, if there's other books out there that I'm not aware of that you're excited about, please let me know so maybe I can add them to my list as well. And yeah, as I always do with these videos, I'm going to be looking down here. If you're wondering what I'm looking at, I'm looking down here at my computer so I can read off the Goodreads synopsises and let you know what these books are about. And yeah, you guys, now is your chance to pull up your own Goodreads and add any of these if these sound like something you might enjoy. So let's get going. Up first, of course, I have a Sylvia Morena Garcia book on this list. I love all of her books that she's been popping out with. We have Silver Nitrate, and let's say this one, Montserrat, I think is how it's pronounced. Montserrat has always been overlooked. She's a talented sound editor, but she's left out of the boys' club running the film industry in 1990s Mexico City. And she's all but invisible to her best friend, Tristan, a charming, if faded soap opera star, yes, though she's been in love with him since childhood. Then Tristan discovers his new neighbor is the cult horror director Abel Ureta, and the legendary author claims he can change their lives, even if his tale of a Nazi occultist imbuing magic into highly volatile silver nitrate stock sounds like sheer fantasy. The magic film was never finished, which is why Ureta swears his career vanished overnight. He is cursed. Now the director wants Montserrat and Tristan to help him shoot the missing scenes and lift the curse, but Montserrat soon notices a dark presence following her, and Tristan begins seeing the ghost of his ex-girlfriend. As they work together to unravel the mystery of the film and the obscure occultist who once roamed the city, Montserrat and Tristan may find that sorcerers and magic are not the only stuff of movies. Yes, some crazy Nazi occult film or something. I am all for this. I can't wait to read this. I thought this next one sounded really cute and fun. That's why it's on this list. The Shocking Confessions of Miss Lydia Bennet, Witch, by Melinda Taub. Miss Lydia Bennet may be the youngest, but what she lacks in maturity and responsibility, she more than makes up for in energy, fun, and magic. In this exuberant reimagining of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, Lydia Bennet puts pen to paper to relate the real events and aftermath of the classic story from her own perspective. Some facts are well known. Mrs. Bennet suffers from her nerves, and Mr. Bennet suffers from Mrs. Bennet, and all 5 daughters suffer from an estate that is entailed only to male heirs. But Lydia also suffers from entirely different concerns. Her best loved sister Kitty is really a barn cat, and Wickham is every bit as wicked as the world believes him to be. But what else would you expect from a demon? Oh my god, Wickham's a demon. Yes, I'm here for it. And if you think Mr. Darcy was uptight about dancing etiquette, wait till you see how he reacts to witchcraft. Oh no. Most of all, Lydia has yet to learn that when you're a witch, promises have power. Yes, seriously, I'm all for this book. I'm here for it. Next up, The Golden Gate by Amy Chua. In Berkeley, California, in 1944, homicide detective Al Sullivan has just left the swanky Claremont Hotel after a drink in the bar when a presidential candidate is assassinated in one of the rooms upstairs. A rich industrialist with enemies among the anarchist factions on the far left, Walter Wilkinson could have been targeted by any number of groups. But strangely, Sullivan's investigation brings up the specter of another tragedy at the Claremont. 10 years ago, the death of 7-year-old Iris Stafford, a member of the Bainbridge family, one of the wealthiest in all of San Francisco. Some say she haunts the Claremont still. The many threads of the case keep leading Sullivan back to the three remaining Bainbridge heiresses, now Iris's sister Isabella and her cousins Cassie and Nicole, determined not to let anything distract him from the truth, not the powerful influence of Bainbridge's grandmother or the political aspirations of Berkeley's district attorney, or the interest of China's First Lady Madame Chiang Kai-shek in his findings. Sullivan follows his investigation to its devastating conclusion. Ooh, yes, this sounds really good. I like this. Next up, Medusa's Sisters by Lauren J.A. Baer. Even before they were transformed into Gorgons, Medusa and her sisters, Stethno and Euryale, were unique among immortals. Curious about mortals and their lives, Medusa and her sisters entered the human world in search of a place to belong, yet quickly found themselves at the perilous center of a dangerous Olympian rivalry and learned too late that a god's love is a violent one. Forgotten by history and diminished by poets, the other two Gorgons have never been more than horrifying hags, damned and doomed, but they were sisters first, and their journey from seaborne origins to the outskirts of the Parthenon is a journey that rests hidden underneath their scales. Monsters, but not monstrous. Stetho and Euryale will step into the light for the first time to tell the story of how all three sisters lived and were changed by each other as they struggle against the inherent conflict between sisterhood and individuality, myth and truth, vengeance and peace. Yes, I'm always here for a good Greek mythology retelling. Next up, King of the Armadillos by Wendy Chin Tanner. Victor Chin's life is turned upside down at the tender age of 15. Diagnosed with Hansen's disease, otherwise known as leprosy, he's forced to leave the family confines of his father's laundry business in the Bronx, the only home he's known since immigrating from China with his older brother, to quarantine alongside patients from all over the country at a federal institution in Carville. At first, Victor is scared not only of the disease, but of the confinement, and wants nothing more than to flee. Between treatments, his dreams of escape, and imagines his life as a fugitive, but soon he finds a new sense of freedom far from home, one without the pull of obligation to his family or the laundry business, or his mother back in China. Here, in the company of an unforgettable cast of characters, Victor finds refuge in music and experiences first love, jealousy, betrayal, and even tragedy. But with the promise of a life-changing cure on the horizon, Victor's time at Carville is running out, and he has some difficult choices to make. This sounds really unique and different. I like it. Next up, The Fraud by Zadie Smith. It is 1873. Miss Eliza Touchet is the Scottish housekeeper and cousin by marriage of a once famous novelist now in decline, William Ainsworth, with whom she has lived for 30 years. Mrs. Touchet is a woman of many interests: literature, justice, abolitionism, class, her cousin, his wives, this life and the next. But she is also skeptical. She suspects her cousin of having no talent, his successful friend Mr. Charles Dickens of being a bully and a moralist, and England of being a land of facades, in which nothing is quite what it seems. Andrew Bogle, meanwhile, grew up enslaved on the Hope Plantation, Jamaica. He knows every lump of sugar comes at a human cost, that the rich deceive the poor, and that people are more easily manipulated than they realize. When Bogle finds himself in London, star witness in a celebrated case of imposture, he knows his future depends on telling the right story. The Tichborne trial, wherein a lower-class butcher from Australia claimed he was in fact the rightful heir of a sizable estate and title, captivates Mrs. Touchet and all of England. Is Sir Roger Tichborne really who he says he is, or is he a fraud? Mrs. Touchet is a woman of the world. Mr. Bogle is no fool, but in a world of hypocrisy and self-deception, deciding what is real proves a complicated task. Oh, that sounds really good. I like kind of the whole concept of this, how all this is all kind of like weave together. You guys, Isabel Cañas has another book coming up. I freaking loved The Hacienda. I'm excited to see what her next book is. That being Vampires of El Norte. El Norte? I think I'm putting too much enunciation there. I think it's just El Norte. As the daughter of a rancher in 1840s Mexico, Nina knows a thing or two about monsters. Her home has long been threatened by tensions with Anglo settlers from the north, but something more sinister lurks near the ranch at nights, something that drains men of their blood and leaves them for dead, something that once attacked Nina 9 years ago. Believing Nina dead, Nestor has been on the run from his grief ever since, moving from ranch to ranch, working as a vaquero, but no amount of drink can dispel the night terrors or sharp teeth. No woman can erase his childhood sweetheart from his mind. When the United States attacks Mexico in 1846, the two are brought abruptly together on the road to war. Nina as a cuadrera, a healer striving to prove her worth to her father so that he does not marry her off to a stranger, and Nestor as a member of the auxiliary cavalry of ranchers and vaqueros. But the shock of their reunion and Nina's rage at Nestor for seemingly abandoning her long ago is quickly overshadowed by the appearance of a nightmare made flesh. And unless Nina and Nestor work through their past and face the future together, neither will survive to see the dawn. So yeah, it seems like there's something with vampires possibly going on in this book. That's what it sounds like. Next up, The Phoenix Crown by Kate Quinn and Janie Chang. San Francisco, 1906. In a city bustling with newly minted millionaires and scheming upstarts, two very different women hope to change their fortunes. Gemma, a golden-haired, silver-voiced soprano whose career desperately needs rekindling, and Suline, a petite and resolute Chinatown embroideress who is determined to escape an arranged marriage. Their paths cross when they are drawn into the orbit of Henry Thornton, a charming railroad magnate whose extraordinary collection of Chinese antiques includes the fabled Phoenix Crown, a legendary relic of Beijing's fallen summer palace. His patronage offers Gemma and Suline the chance of a lifetime, but their lives are thrown into turmoil when a devastating earthquake rips San Francisco apart, and Thornton disappears, leaving behind a mystery reaching further than anyone could have imagined. Until the Phoenix Crown reappears 5 years later at a sumptuous Paris costume ball, drawing Gemma and Suline together in one last desperate quest for justice. Yes, I'm all here for this book. I love Kate Quinn. Next up, The Woman in the Castello by Kelsey James. Rome, 1965. Aspiring actress Sylvia Whitford arrives at Rome's famed, what does that say? City Studios? I need glasses, you guys. From Los Angeles, ready for her big break and a taste of something here. I can't, it's in Latin, I can't pronounce it. Instead, she learns that the movie in which she was cast has been canceled. Oh no. Desperate for money, Sylvia has only one choice: seek out the Italian aunt she has never met. Gabriella Conti lives in a crumbling castello on the edge of a volcanic lake. Sylvia's mother refuses to explain the rift that drove the sisters apart, but Sylvia is fascinated by Gabriella, a once famous actress who still radiates charisma, and the eerie castle inspires Sylvia's second chance when it becomes the location for a new horror movie, aptly named The Revenge of the Lake Witch, and she lands a starring role. Sylvia immerses herself in the part of an ingenue tormented by the ghost of her beautiful, seductive ancestor. But when Gabriella abruptly vanishes, the movie's make-believe terrors seep into reality. No one else on the set seems to share Sylvia's suspicions, yet as she delves into Gabriella's disappearance, she triggers a chain of events that illuminate dark secrets in the past and a growing menace in the present. Ooh, I really like this. Like an actress who's kind of down on her luck. She's desperate for a role. She comes here for a horror movie, but then all sorts of hell breaks loose. I'm loving the idea of this, yes. Next up, Learned by Heart by Emma Donoghue. Drawing on years of investigation and Anne Lister's 5 million word secret journal, Learned by Heart is the long-buried love story of Eliza Rain, an orphan heiress banished from India to England at age 6, and Anne Lister, a brilliant, troublesome tomboy who met at the Manor School for Young Ladies in York in 1805, when they are both 14. Emotionally intense, psychologically compelling, and deeply researched, Learned by Heart is an extraordinary work of fiction by one of the world's greatest storytellers. Full of passion and heartbreak, the tangled lives of Anne Lister and Eliza Rain form a love story for the ages. I'm really all here for this book. There is a television show that was on HBO Max before it became Max. It was 2 seasons. Called Gentleman Jack, and it was about the real historical figure Anne Lister, who was a well-known lesbian during that time period. And it looks like this book is kind of exploring another part of Anne Lister's life that the show never ever got around to. So yeah, I'm excited to get around to this book at some point. Next up, Queen of Exiles by Vanessa Riley. In 1810, Louise is crowned queen as her husband begins his reign over the first and only free only free black nation in the Western Hemisphere. But despite their newfound freedom, Haitians still struggle under mountains of debt to France and indifference from former allies in Britain and the new United States. Louise desperately tries to steer the country's political course as King Henry descends into a mire of mental illness. In 1820, King Henry is overthrown and dies by his own hand. Louise and her daughters manage to flee to Europe with their smuggled jewels. In exile, the resilient Louise redefines her role, recovering the fortune that Henry had lost and establishing herself as an equal to the kings of European nations. With newspapers and gossip tracking their every movement, Louise and her daughters tour Europe like other royals, complete with glittering balls and princes with marriage proposals. As they find their footing and acceptance, they discover more about themselves, their blackness, and the opportunities they can grasp in a European and male-dominated world. Ooh, this sounds really good too. I think I get to get my hands on this one too. Every single one of these books, I'm looking forward to, you guys. Next up, Let the Dead Bury the Dead by Alison Epstein. And you guys, back in January, when I did my top 5 most anticipated books for the year, if I'm not mistaken, I think this book was number 1. A couple years ago, I read Alison Epstein's A Tip for the Hangman, and I love that book. It was like easily my favorite book that year, so I've been anxiously looking forward to another book by Alison Epstein. So yeah, it is finally here, and I can't wait to grab it. St. Petersburg, 1812. Russian forces have defeated Napoleon at great cost, and the Tsar's empire is once again at peace. Sasha, a captain in the Imperial Army, returns home to Grand Duke Felix, the disgraced second son of the Tsar, and his impressively charming lover, but their reunion is quickly interrupted. Everything changes with the arrival of Sophia, a mysteriously persuasive figure whose disruptive presence Sasha suspects to be something more than human. Felix, insisting that Sasha's old-fashioned superstitions are misplaced, takes Sophia into his confidence, a connection that quickly becomes both personal and political. On her incendiary advice, Felix confronts his father about the brutal conditions of the common people in the aftermath of the war to disastrous results, separating him from Sasha and setting him on a collision course with a vocal group of dissidents, the Yeah, it's Russian. I can't pronounce that word, you guys. I'm sorry. Meanwhile, this group of dissidents, I'll call them, they plan to gridlock St. Petersburg with a citywide strike in hopes of awakening the upper classes to the grim realities of the laboring people's circumstances. Maria, a resourceful, sometimes thief, and trusted lieutenant of this group, also falls under Sophia's spell, and allied with Felix and her fellow revolutionaries, finds herself in the middle of a battle she could never have predicted. As Sophia's influence grows and rising tensions threaten the Tsar's peace, Sasha, Felix, and Maria are forced to choose between the ideals they hold close and the people they love. Yay! I'm all here for Russia, like Imperial Russia and whatnot. I love that time period. Next up, Sinners of Starlight City by Anika Scott. It's the worst year of the Great Depression, and America needs all the hope it can get. The Chicago World's Fair, a glittery city within a city, becomes a symbol of the good that's yet to come. But every utopia has a seedy side, and that's Rosa Mancuso's world. As the mysterious Madame Mystique, she mixes magic with a dose of bearskin burlesque, bringing customers to the home of the fair's carnival rides and spectacles. Rosa doesn't perform for fame, though. She has come from Mussolini's Italy to America, where she's plotting her revenge for the murders of her family. The perpetrator will soon arrive at the World's Fair via a celebrated Italian air fleet, and Rosa is determined to be prepared. But when her estranged cousin Mina comes to her desperate for help with a dangerous mobster close on her heels, Rosa agrees to protect Mina and her new baby, born across the color line. With the clock ticking, Rosa decides the only way to survive is to make vengeance a family affair and prompt everyone to at last confront the sins from their past. Yeah, that sounds really good. Next up, The African Samurai by Craig Shreve. Okay, this is saying that it's set in India and Portugal and Japan, in Africa in the 16th century. So in 1579, a Portuguese trade ship sails into port in Japan, loaded with European wares and weapons. On board is Father Father Alessandro, an Italian priest and Jesuit missionary whose authority in Central and East Asia is second only to the Pope's. Beside him is his protector, a large and imposing East African man. Taken from his village as a boy, sold as a slave to Portuguese mercenaries, and forced to fight in wars in India, the young but experienced soldier is haunted by memories of his past. From Japan, Father Alessandro leads an expedition pushing inland toward the capital city of Kyoto. A riot brings his protector in front of the land's most powerful warlord. This warlord is preparing a campaign to complete the unification of a nation that's been torn apart by over 100 years of civil war. In exchange for permission to build a church, Father Alessandro, his protector to this warlord, and the young East African man is reminded once again that he is less of a human and more of a thing to be traded and sold. After pledging his allegiance to the Japanese warlord, the two men from vastly different worlds develop a trust and respect for one another. The young soldier is granted the role of samurai, a title that has never been given to a foreigner. He is also given a new name, Yasuka. Not all are happy with Yasuka's ascension. There are whispers that he may soon be given his own fief, his own servants, his own samurai to command, but all of his dreams hinge on his ability to protect his new lord from the threats, both military and political, and from enemies both without and within. You guys, I am so sorry for that synopsis. I just feel like I was stumbling all over the place and I was getting just massively tongue-tied the whole thing. I am seriously having difficulty seeing my screen right now. I seriously need new glasses. I am having an extremely difficult time reading. But yeah, once again, pull up Goodreads for this one because I really severely butchered the synopsis of this and it sounds really, really good. And I would hate for how I'm sitting here reading it all to deter you guys away from it. Next up, After the Forest by Kel Woods. 20 years after the witch in the gingerbread house, Greta and Hans are struggling to get by. Their mother and stepmother are long dead. Hans is deeply in debt from gambling, and the countryside lies in ruin, its people starving in the aftermath of a brutal war. Greta has a secret, the witch's grimoire, secreted away and whispering in Greta's ear for the past 2 decades, and the recipe inside that makes the best gingerbread you've ever tasted. As long as she can bake, Greta can keep her small family afloat. But in a village full of superstition, Greta and her mysteriously addictive gingerbread, not to mention the rumors about her childhood misadventures, is a source of gossip and suspicion. And now dark magic is returning to the woods, and Greta's magic she is still trying to understand, may be the only thing that can save her if it doesn't kill her first. So yeah, this is like a retelling of Hansel and Gretel, but like it says like it's taking place 20 years after those crazy events. And yeah, I'm assuming it's taking place in like maybe a small German village because the original story is like German, right? So I'm assuming it's going to take place in some little small German village and kind of have a bit of more of a historical kind of aspect to it to some degree, but while also being a retelling of a sort. So yeah, this sounds pretty exciting. I can't wait to get to it. Next up, Red Rabbit by Alex Grecian. Sadie Grace is wanted for witchcraft, dead or alive, and every hired gun in Kansas is out to collect the bounty on her head, including bona fide witch hunter Old Tom and his mysterious mute ward, Rabbit. On the road to Bergen County, they're joined by 2 vagabond cowboys with a strong sense of adventure, but no sense of purpose, and a recently widowed schoolteacher with nothing left to lose. As their posse grows, so too does the danger. Racing along the drought-stricken plains is a stolen red stagecoach. They encounter monsters more wicked than witches lurking along the dusty trail, but the crew is determined to get that bounty or die trying. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I like there's like almost like this Old West sort of type vibe to it, it seems like. Next up, The Square of Sevens by Laura Shepard Robinson. Cornwall, 1730. A young girl known only as Red travels with her father, making a living predicting fortunes using the ancient Cornish method of the Square of Sevens. Shortly before he dies, her father entrusts Red's care to a gentleman scholar, along with a document containing the secret of the Square of Sevens technique. Raised as a lady amidst the Georgian splendor of Bath, Red's fortune-telling delights in high society, but she cannot ignore the questions that gnaw at her soul. Who was her mother? How did she die? And who are the mysterious enemies her father was always terrified would find them? The pursuit of these mysteries takes her from Cornwall and Bath to London and Devon, from the rough ribaldry of the Bartholomew Fair to the ground houses of two of the most powerful families in England. And while while Red's quest brings her the possibility of great reward, it also leads her to grave danger. Ooh. Next up, The Apology by Jimin Han. In South Korea, a 105-year-old woman receives a letter. 10 days later, she has been thrust into the afterlife, fighting to head off a curse that will otherwise devastate generations to come. Janga Cha has always shouldered the burden of upholding the family name. When she sent her daughter-in-law to America to cover up an illegitimate birth, she was simply doing what was needed to preserve the reputations of her loved ones. How could she have known that decades later this decision would return to haunt her, threatening to tear apart her bond with her beloved son, her relationship with her infuriating, insolent sisters, and the future of the family she has worked so hard to protect? Part ghost story and part family epic, The Apology is an incisive tale of sisterhood and diaspora, reaching back to the days of Japanese colonialism and the Korean War, and told through the singular voice of a defiant, funny, and unforgettable centenarian. So yeah, it looks like we're learning like the story of this woman who's like 105 years old, something like that. It's going to go back decades into the past. Sounds kind of cool. Next up, Every Rising Sun by Jamila Ahmed. In 12th century Persia, clever and dreamy Scheherazade stumbles on the Malik's beloved wife, entwined with a lover in a sun-dabbled courtyard. When Scheherazade slips her first tale, the story of this infidelity to the Malik, she sets the empire on fire. Enraged at his wife's betrayal, the once gentle Malik beheads her, but when that killing does not quench his anger, the Malik begins to marry and behead a new girl night after night. Furious at the murders, his province seized on rebellion's edge. To suppress her guilt and quell threats of a revolt, and perhaps to many the man she has loved since childhood, Scheherazade makes a plan. She persuades her father, the Malik's vizier, to use his sway as a top official and offer her as the Malik's next wife. On their wedding night, Scheherazade starts a tale, but as the sun ascends, she cuts the story off, ensuring that she will live to tell another tale by repeating the practices night after night. But the Malik's rage runs too deep for Scheherazade to exercise alone, and so she and her father persuade the Malik to leave Persia and the memories of his unfaithful wife, to join Saladin's fight against the Crusaders in Palestine. The wider world is even more perilous, with plots spun against Scheherazade and the Seljuks from all corners. Scheherazade must maneuver through intrigue in the age's greatest court to safeguard her people. All the while, Scheherazade must keep the Malik in ties with her otherworldly tales, because the slightest misstep could cost Scheherazade her head. I really like this, because this is kind of like a retelling of 1001 Nights, but kind of throwing a little bit of a different spin in there to kind of keep it a little bit more exciting, you know. I'm definitely here for this book. I can't wait to get to this. And the last recommendation that I have here for you guys, The Other Princess, a novel of Queen Victoria's goddaughter by Denny S. Bryce. And you guys, this is completely new information for me. I had no idea about this, and it is based off a historical fact, apparently. Y'all know how much I love Queen Victoria, so this is brand new information for me. I'm definitely going to pick up this book because it sounds really good. With a brilliant mind and a fierce will to survive, Sarah Forbes Bonetta, a kidnapped African princess, is rescued from enslavement at 7 years old and presented to Queen Victoria as a gift. To the Queen, the girl is an exotic trophy to be trotted out for the entertainment of the royal court, and to showcase Victoria's magnanimity. Sarah charms most of the people she meets, even those who would cast her aside. Her keen intelligence and her aptitude for languages and musical composition helps Sarah navigate the Victorian era as an outsider, given her insider privileges. But embedded in Sarah's past is her destiny, haunted by visions of destruction and decapitations. She desperately seeks a home she will never run from, never fear, a refuge from nightmares and memories of death. From West Africa to Windsor Castle to Sierra Leone to St. James Palace and the Lagos colony, Sarah juggles the power and pitfalls of a royal upbringing as she battles racism and systematic oppression on her way to living a life worthy of a Yoruba princess. And it says here, based on the real life of Queen Victoria's black goddaughter, Sarah Forbes Bonetta's story is a sweeping saga of an African princess in Victorian England and West Africa as she searches for a home, family, love, and identity. I can't wait to get to this. This sounds really interesting. I love the Victorian era. So yeah, seems kind of like unique and different for the era. So you guys, that is it for my recommendations for books that are coming out in the historical genre, anywhere from like July to December of the rest of this year. In the comments below, like I said, this genre is massive. Are there some books that I've left off this list that you guys are personally looking forward to? Like I said, a lot of this list that I compiled is just stuff that kind of caught my eye that I was like, ooh, I'm interested in that. So yeah, feel free to tell me some books that are coming up that I'm not aware of so I can add them to my list. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.